The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just gotten back from my morning walk, the one my doctor told me to do after the bypass. 3 miles every day, no excuses. And I was still catching my breath on the porch steps when my daughter in law pulled into the driveway. She got out of the car without turning off the engine. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was that she didn't look at me when she walked past. She said she needed to talk to my son. I said he wasn't home yet, he was still at work. She said she'd wait inside. I told her she was welcome to do that. I went to the kitchen to make coffee. I heard her walking around upstairs, not pacing, more like she was looking for something. I turned the burner on and stood there listening and tried to tell myself I was imagining it. I wasn't imagining it. My son's name is Theodore. Everyone calls him Theo. He's 53 years old, and he has his mother's eyes and his grandfather's stubbornness, and for 31 years I watched him build a life I was proud of. He met his wife, I'll call her his wife, though I can barely get the word out now, when he was 28. She was sharp and pretty, and she laughed at his jokes, and in those early years I thought she was good for him. I thought she balanced out the quiet in him. I told his mother that once a long time ago. His mother agreed. His mother has been gone 11 years. I think about that a lot now. How she was spared this. Theo came home around 6. I heard the front door, heard him call out for her, heard him call out for her, heard their voices go up the stairs. I sat in the kitchen with my coffee gone cold and I waited. After a while, the voices got louder. Not words I could make out, just the sound of something being decided, the kind of sound a house makes when something inside it is breaking. He came downstairs alone 40 minutes later. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and he put his hands flat on the wood and he looked at them for a long time before he said anything. He said, "Dad, she wants me to leave." I said, "What do you mean, leave?" He said, "She changed the front door code this morning. She had a bag packed for me in the garage. She says the marriage is over and she wants me out by tonight." I looked at my son's face. He's 53 years old, and he looked about 9 right then. That's the thing nobody tells you about watching your children get hurt. They always look 9, no matter how old they are, no matter how long it's been. You look at them and you see the boy who fell off his bike on the driveway and scraped both palms open and came running to you like you had the power to undo it. I said, "Why?" He said, "She's been seeing someone." "Well, about 2 years, she thinks. She's not sure she wants to stop. She thinks. She's not sure." Those were the words he used. Like she had handed him her confusion, and he had accepted it, folded it up, put it in his pocket to carry. I asked him if he'd called a lawyer. He said not yet. I asked him where he was going to go. He said he didn't know. I told him to get his bag from the garage and come home. I told him this house had a room with his name on it, and it always had, and it always would. He looked at me like he wasn't sure he deserved that, which made me want to put my fist through the wall. But I'm 68 years old, and I've learned something about where that kind of anger goes if you let it out the wrong way. So I just said it again. "Come home, Theo. That's all." He went back upstairs to get a few more things. She didn't come down while he was there. He brought one suitcase and a box with some books in it. He left behind 31 years of furniture and photographs, and the bread machine his mother gave them as a wedding gift that still sat on the counter and probably never got used. He slept in his old room that night. I sat in the kitchen until about 2 in the morning just thinking. The next 3 weeks were quiet in the way that grief is quiet. Not peaceful, just muffled. Theo went to work every day. He came home and ate dinner and helped me with the yard on weekends and didn't talk much. And I didn't push. And I didn't push. I know my son. He processes things the way his grandfather did, which is to say slowly and all the way down, and if you try to rush it, you just drive it deeper. His daughter called twice a week. She's 26, lives in Portland now, works for a nonprofit doing something with urban water systems that I'm proud of, even though I only half understand it. She was furious in the quiet way the women in our family get furious. Not loud, not dramatic, just absolutely certain and absolutely done. She told her father she loved him. She did not ask about her mother. His son called less. He's 24 and lives across town, and I think he was still trying to figure out how to hold what he knew about his mother against what he'd always believed about her, and that takes time. I didn't fault him for it. I just worried. About a month after Theo moved in, I got a call from my brother. My brother is 71. He lives in the same town where we grew up, about 40 miles from here, in the house we were raised in. He never left. I left at 19 to go to school, and then to work, and then to build a life, and he stayed. And for most of my adult life, I think we both believed that said something about who we were. I'm not sure anymore what it said. He called to tell me our father's lawyer had been in touch. Now, I need to stop here and tell you something about my father. My father's name was Leonard. He was born in 1931 in a small town in western Pennsylvania, the son of a machinist and a woman who kept a garden big enough to feed 6 children through 2 recessions. He was a practical man. He didn't waste words, and he didn't waste money, and he didn't explain himself, which was sometimes a virtue and sometimes just a way of keeping everyone at arm's length. He drove a pickup truck until it died, and then he drove another one. He wore the same coat for 16 years. He retired from the county roads department at 65, and then he kept a small property maintenance business going part-time until he was 78 because sitting still made him nervous. He died in February. He was 91 years old, and he died in his own bed in his own house, and he was lucid until about 4 days before the end, which is more than most people get and more than he ever expected. I held his hand the last night. My brother was on one side and I was on the other, and the hospice nurse was in a chair by the window reading something. And the house was very quiet, and outside it was snowing. I didn't know, none of us knew, that he had quietly purchased 11 acres of land about 20 years ago. Not the house, which we knew about. Different land. A parcel on the edge of town, wooded, sitting along a creek, the kind of land that developers had been circling for years, and that my father apparently had been watching just as carefully. He paid $48,000 for it in 2004. My brother's lawyer told us when we finally sat down to go through everything that the current assessed value was just under $900,000. There was a developer who had been making inquiries for the last 3 years. My father had never mentioned it once. Not once. Not to me. Not to my brother. Not to anyone that we knew of. He just owned it. He paid the property taxes every year out of an account none of us knew existed, a modest savings account at a community bank in town that had about $22,000 left in it, along with a handwritten note paper clipped to the statement that said, in his handwriting, for the taxes, use what's left for something useful. Use what's left for something useful. That was my father. That was exactly my father. The will divided the estate between my brother and me, equal shares. The house to my brother, since he'd been there, and he'd been the one to look after things in those last years, which was right, and I'd have wanted it that way. The land and the savings account to be split between us equally. No explanation, no letter, no ceremony. Just the documents, just the numbers, just his name signed at the bottom in the shaky handwriting of a man who was 90 years old and still doing things himself. I drove out to see the land the week after the lawyer meeting. I parked on the road and walked in along the creek for about a half mile. It was early April. The trees were just starting. The creek was running high and fast from the snowmelt, and the sound of it was the kind of sound that gets into your chest and settles there. I stood in the middle of it, and I thought about my father buying this land at 72 years old, walking it the way I was walking it, deciding something. I don't know what he decided exactly, but I know he kept it. For 20 years he kept it. For 20 years he kept it. He paid for it and he kept it. And he never said a word. I called Theo that night and told him. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Did you know he had it?" I said, "No." He was quiet again. Then he said, he was quiet again. Then he said, "He never said anything about it to you." "Not once?" I said, "Not once." I heard him exhale. He said, "That sounds like Grandpa." It did. It sounded exactly like him. Here is where I have to tell you about something that happened 4 days after I got back from seeing the land. Theo had mentioned to his wife, to her, during one of the early calls with the lawyers, that there might be an inheritance coming. He hadn't known the details yet, just that the estate was being settled and there might be something. He'd said it, I think, the way you say things when you're still trying to be reasonable. still trying to show good faith, still trying to act like the marriage can be unwound without becoming a war. She called her own lawyer the same afternoon. The claim she was making was that any inheritance received during the marriage was marital property and should be considered in the asset division. She was wrong about the law. In this state, inheritance is separate property. Full stop. It doesn't matter when you receive it. But wrong doesn't mean cheap. Theo's lawyer had to spend time on it. Time cost money. And the way she filed it, the timing of it, the way she structured the argument, told me something I probably already knew but hadn't let myself say out loud. She had known about the land, not the details, maybe, but she had known there was something coming. She had known before she had that bag packed in the garage. She had made her calculations, and somewhere in those calculations, she had decided that the timing was right, that this was the moment to move while Theo was still raw and confused and before anything was signed or settled. I am 68 years old. I have watched people make bad decisions for a long time. I try not to judge. I know that human beings are complicated and that marriages end for complicated reasons and that there are usually two sides. But I had watched her walk past me on those porch steps without looking at me. I had heard her walking around upstairs while the engine was still running. I had listened to my son say the words she thinks and she's not sure, like he was apologizing for her uncertainty. And I thought about my father's land and my father's note and my father's 20 years of silence. And I understood, in the way you understand things when you're 68 and you've buried enough people to know what really matters, that some things are not complicated. Some things are just what they are. Theo's lawyer handled it well. The inheritance claim was dismissed within 6 weeks. The land was not in play. The divorce itself took about 7 months. There was a house, there were retirement accounts. There were the usual negotiations about who gets what, and what's fair, and what counts. Theo came through it. He's not the same. You don't go through something like that and come out the same. But he came through it. He started running in the mornings. He called his daughter more. He and his son had a long conversation in October that I wasn't part of and don't know the details of, but afterwards something shifted between them. Some door opened up that had been stuck, and I could see it in the way they talked when they were together. Her lawyer's fees, I heard through channels, was significant. The inheritance claim that hadn't worked had cost her. And the man she had been seeing, the one she'd been seeing for 2 years, the one she had been not sure she wanted to stop seeing, had, by the time the divorce was final, apparently moved on. I don't know the details of that either. I only know what Theo told me, which was not much. Just that she had called him once in November and the call had lasted about 3 minutes, and she had cried and he had listened, and then he had said he hoped she would be all right, and he had hung up. I asked him how he felt after that. He thought about it for a while. He was washing dishes at the time. He kept washing dishes, and then he said, "Sad, I think. Mostly just sad." I nodded. He said, "Not for me. I think I'm past that part. Just sad that it went the way it did." I told him that was a reasonable thing to feel. He said, "She used to be someone I trusted completely. That's hard to put down." I said, "I know." He said, "Did you ever have a moment like that with Mom, where something changed?" I thought about his mother. I thought about 41 years. I thought about the ways a marriage is not just two people, but a whole architecture, a whole language, a whole set of habits that become as natural as breathing. And I thought about what it is to lose that, not to betrayal, but to illness, which is a different kind of loss with a different kind of grief. And neither kind is worse. They're just different shapes of the same absence. I said, once or twice. But we came back from it. He nodded. He kept washing the dishes. After a while, he said, "I think I'd like to do something with the land." I asked him what he meant. He said, "Not sell it, or not all of it." I was thinking Grandpa always talked about that creek. Do you remember? When we were kids, he used to talk about that creek. Do you remember? When we were kids, he used to talk about that creek, how he fished it when he was young, before everything got developed. I said, yes, I remembered. He said, I was thinking maybe we could keep part of it as it is, do something with it that he would have liked, a trail or something, a small preserve. I don't know exactly. I just think he'd have wanted it to stay land. I stood there in my kitchen listening to my 53-year-old son talk about a creek his grandfather used to fish. And I thought about the note on the bank statement, use what's left for something useful. And I thought about the way my father walked, and the coat he wore for 16 years, and the truck he drove until it died, and I understood what my brother and I were going to do with that land. We haven't done it yet. There are things still to work out, surveys, conversations with the county, questions about what a preserve actually requires. My brother is on board. Theo is helping us research it. My granddaughter called from Portland and said she wanted to be involved, that her organization had contacts in land conservation, that she thought she could help navigate the process. I sit on the porch some mornings after my walk and I think about all of it. The letter, the engine still running, the bag in the garage, the creek in April, my father's handwriting on a piece of paper. I'm not angry anymore. I was for a while. I was angry in the way old men get angry, which is quietly and thoroughly, and for longer than anyone else knows about. What it passes if you let it. Where it doesn't pass exactly, it changes shape. It becomes something more like clarity. Theo's still here. He's been looking at places of his own, nothing rushed, just looking. He'll go when he's ready. In the meantime, he mows the yard and makes dinner twice a week, and we watch baseball on Friday nights like we did when he was a kid. And those Friday nights are something I look forward to in a way I didn't expect. Some things break open a life, and you spend years trying to close the wound. And some things break open a life, and you look inside and find something you didn't know was there. My father owned that land for 20 years. 11 acres along a creek in western Pennsylvania. He paid his taxes, kept his account, said nothing, and left us a note that said, make something useful out of what's left. I think we're trying to do that. I think that's the only answer that makes sense. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to think about this, really think about it. If you found out someone you trusted had been making plans while you were grieving, what would you do? Would you fight it, or would you let the land speak for itself? Tell me in the comments. I'd like to know. I've been thinking lately about what my father actually left us, not the land. Though the land is real, 11 acres along a creek, and it's still there, still running cold in April the way it always did. I mean what he left and the way he lived. The coat he wore for 16 years, the truck he drove until it died, the account nobody knew about with a note that said, use what's left for something useful. He didn't lecture. He didn't explain himself. He just did things a certain way and then he was gone, and what was left behind told the whole story. I think about that when I think about what happened to Theo. Not with anger anymore. I told you the anger changed shape, and it did. But I think about the sequence of it. She had that bag packed before she told him anything. The engine was still running when she walked past me on those steps. The inheritance claim was filed within days of Theo mentioning there might be something coming. That's not impulse, that's a plan. And a plan like that, built on someone else's grief, built on the assumption that a man who just lost his father would be too broken to notice. That kind of plan has a weight to it. It doesn't disappear just because it fails. It stays with the person who made it. I don't say that with satisfaction. I say it because I think it's true. The choices we make in the worst moments of other people's lives are the most honest thing about us. Not what we say at funerals, or what we post, or what we tell people when things are going well. What we do when someone else is on their knees. That's the real record. Theo got back up. That's the other part of the story that I don't want to get lost. He came to my house with one suitcase and a box of books, and he slept in his old room and he went to work the next morning. It didn't fall apart, not visibly, not in the way that would have been easy to understand. He just got quiet and he got methodical and he kept going. That's not nothing. That takes something, not luck, not circumstance, but a kind of internal stubbornness that either you have or you build, and I watched him build more of it over those 7 months than he'd needed in the previous 20 years. His grandfather had it, that same quality, the ability to look at what's real, accept what it is, and keep moving without needing anyone to witness the effort. I used to think that was a limitation in my father, that his silence was distance. I understand now it was just a different kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need an audience. What I want to say, if I'm being honest, is this. Integrity is not something you perform when things are easy. It's something you either have or you don't when everything is hard and no one would blame you for taking the shortcut. Theo could have made that call differently. He could have hidden the inheritance information, fought dirty, meshed to what was done to him. He didn't. He let his lawyer handle it cleanly, and he kept his word in every part of the process, and he came out the other side with something she can never take a claim on, which is his own sense of who he is. My father bought that land at 72 years old and told nobody. He paid his taxes and kept his note and let the creek keep running. And when he was gone, what he'd built quietly was still there, worth more than anyone expected, ready to become something. That's the only model I know. Build quietly, hold your ground, let what you actually do speak for what you are. The rest takes care of itself, one way or another, in time.